here is my newest book, just recently out, Conjure, with a rabbit made of twigs and sticks, sort of half-made on it. So my plan is to read for a while from Conjure, and then some newer work, and then back to Conjure, and then some newer work again, trying to change it up a bit. Okay, starting with the title poem. Conjure. How did the synthesis cross the abyss? In a sentimental story, there is only one of something, one newborn, one moment, one once embalmed in myrrh. All I want is not to be first on one side, then the other, but to conjure a stream of sounds and images for which I am not responsible, and maneuver within it. Mouth and tail, one thought. The sea now full of cannibal jellies, blue, if the sky says so. Pinocchio. Strand, string, in this dream, the paths cross and cross again. They are spelling a real boy out of repetition. Each one is the one real boy. Each knows he must be wrong about this, but he can't feel how. The fish and the fisherman, the pilot, the princess, the fireman, and the ones on fire. Speculative fiction. The idea that producing a string of nonsense syllables while pointing toward an object may cause that object to change is common in children on the verge of language. The idea that force exists only as an interaction between objects, while an object is a kind of kink in a force field. The idea that if one survives X number of years, one will live to see how things turn out, or even that things end well. In the future, we will face new problems. How will we represent the variety of human types once all the large animals are gone? As sly as a mother, as hungry as an orphan? Notice the way a gesture used to ward off trouble became cheerful waving. There was so much looming and vanishing to take note of always. We felt like play actors before we knew what we were about, and after. Turns out the mummy's curse is real. You pump thick death out of the ground and burn it, it kills you. But in all the movies, curses are a cheap plot trick. The doofus who can't read the hieroglyph dies first, and no one misses him. Then, we were born yesterday. We're sorry. And then, this is one I don't usually read, but I am. Gainsaying. A transparent ellipse with blinking lights around the edges and an open mouth at one end is extremely serious. These things don't just happen. These things don't just happen. Trait blockchain encryption. A glowing purse that unlatches with a snap, horizontally suspended. At around age 2, a child will be embarrassed by her reflection. This means she is self-conscious. And this one, I want to, in the wake of that, I don't want to call it a debate, but that debacle cage match we saw last night, I want to, dedicate the second half of this poem, because a lot of my poems are in two parts, and I don't really stop and say 1, 2, but this isn't a first and a second part. I want to dedicate the second part to the Trumpster. Where will you spend eternity? How would you describe a god who could use magic but doesn't, who prefers elaborate widgets and toggles, seconds toppling one by one, the careful recording of endless instructions? We're riveted by the hell show. The devil plays a huckster. What will he come out with next? Demons banished for dramatic effect are brought back to lobby for poisoning children. We can't believe they let us watch. In fact, they make us. Care. Dress like you care. Eat like you care. Care like you care. You don't think apples just grow on trees, do you? A fish taps a clam against a bony knob of coral to crack its shell, which demonstrates intelligence, yes, but is the fish pleased with itself? Alone in your crib, you form syllables. Are you happy when one is like another? Add yourself to yourself. Now you have someone. You might have noticed the presence of children in this book. As a few of you know, I have 3.5-year-old granddaughters now. While I was writing this book, they were babies, and for some of the time they were still in the womb, theoretical, but for some of the time they were babies, and my husband and I were taking care of them a lot, so they started to come into my thinking a lot. I'm going to go on now. I'll come back to conjure after a while, but I'm going to skip to reading from a forthcoming manuscript called Threat Landscape. Hang on. Domestic as an empty shopping cart parked on a ledge above a freeway. Artifactual as an acorn barnacle. What is the purpose of barnacles? People ask the internet. Barnacles are filter feeders. They're fish tank decor. A plaque of barnacles on top of a toilet. This cluster of brittle puckers clinging to its old idea. These craters striped pale lavender for some unlikely eye. And again, for those couple of you who might know, this is a newer poem, but I've moved it into Threat Landscape. Anyway, startle reflex. Ford's robo-dogs roam the factory floor and enjoy a good belly rub. People are startled to discover that their inner monologues are ghost-written. A sentence that once made sense and now does not appears haunted. Experts are surprised to learn sparrows across North America have changed their tune. Let's just make it to the end. Everyone's riveted by the shock of the disaster victims, the way they search for words. On growth. Dressed all in plastic, which means oil, we're bright-eyed, scrambling for the colored cubes spilled on the rug's polymer. Inside each is a tiny car. When we can't unscrew the tops, we cry for help. We're optimists. To sleep is to fall into belief. Airing even our worst suspicions may be pleasurable. We are carried, buoyed. In sleep, the body can heal itself, grow larger. Creatures that never wake can sprout a whole new limb, a tail. This may be wrong. Our days. In Chuck's dream, a strange woman is smoking in our kitchen. She's doing her best, she says, exhaling into the oven. Then 3 military men burst in without knocking. They say they've come to establish order, but their uniforms are strange. Chuck suspects they're really salesmen. Their leader stands too close as he begins his pitch, close enough to spread a virus. I take a photo of a house painted half blue, half pink. Why am I drawn to things that make no sense? Or is their sense excessive? You need to decontextualize an object in order to see it, I once said. Last sloth in a pocket of rainforest. Exquisite scent of hyacinth wafted on the wingless breeze. Vultures. A product can be authentic, an object cannot. This presents a problem. An identity can be authentic, an experience cannot. How is your sleep experience? Asks Marriott. Praise or blame is the only legitimate response. Vultures wheel over Miami. A sign that appears day after day is not a sign. The library boasts a fine collection of books written in private languages. Identity is made of select experiences. If you are genuinely sick, the leaves recede, and the flickering holes between them come forward. Not angels, but unnamed objects. The sleep problem. If there's anything I can do to help me, I said, that's not what I meant. I must hold my intention in my mind's eye, or it will go astray. I must remember to intend to hold it tenderly. Kickety-doo-dah, I say, when you flop over in bed thrashing, meaning zippity-brew-ha-ha in a language I keep forgetting you don't speak. A sentence begins and ends in the present, but on the way we need to hurry. Zippity-doo-dah is a slave song commissioned by Walt Disney. Elmer Fudd aims his blunderbuss, his boundless, abstract rage. How to disappear. You had been swinging restlessly between the appearance of spontaneity and the appearance of serious thought. You had been changing lanes after a glance in a mirror honest about its tendency to distort. What choice did you have? It was soothing to watch wisps of smoke from a nearby chimney disappearing one by one. Do you like pulses, ridges, ripples, stretching into obscurity? Would you prefer a flicker to a steady light source? This one stutters slightly, hesitant, as if it could hold something in reserve. Now I'm going to go back to conjure for a little while, if I can find where I was. Hey, Chuck. Shh. Shh. Okay. He's cooking, but I'm sure it'll be good. This is called Work Songs, and I decided to read this Actually, after last night, too. It's not specifically about Trump. In fact, it's about a road rage murder, but it's, about rage and murder, which Trump reminds me of. Work songs. The emperor is a pig, and so are you, starts up again. It's called freedom in a song. I turn my power on and prove it all night, and every day I am defiant and insulated in the thought bubble of your car. I will survive is my most popular moment. People shoot people, men shoot girls over a stretch of road that they don't want, that they hate. I've still got a lot of fight left. Pretty little. I'm not lonely because I have secrets. I'm lonely because words can't bring the past into the present, which amounts to the same thing. Jack Rabbit and the Lonely Present is the title of a book I almost wrote. I'm lonely because you're sure you've heard something like this everywhere before. Polly Pea Pod and the Deep Hole. You think you can make something out of it the way you made much of the slanted light and deep shadows of autumn. None such. This eucalyptus, with its elliptical leaves, dangling light and dry as an abandoned chrysalis, with its modest bunches of pale pink flowers and languid pose, is my unattainable ideal. Of a piece, in pieces, past it all, and in plain view, nowhere in the blasted web of stars is there any such beauty. Even. First they thought they could get things straight. Then they thought they could get even. They invented numbers to find out if the harm they'd suffered equaled the harm they'd caused. It didn't. Then they cast blame into bars and carried it forward. They were forward-looking. We are. Numbers tick upward on a board above our heads. We've lost track of what they measure, but it's something bad. Twilight. Where there's smoke, this I want to also dedicate to Trump. Twilight. Where there's smoke, there are mirrors and a dry ice machine. Industrial quality fans, if I've learned anything about the present moment. But who doesn't love a flame? The way one leaps into being full-fledged, then leans over to chat. Already the light is retrospective, sourceless, is losing itself, though the trees are clearly limbed. Understandings. To convey great effort and mild reluctance, one groans briefly when sitting up in bed. This is sometimes known as prayer. Ignore the wind chimes, they're a bad example. To stand beneath or walk behind, to comprehend, to grab wildly at surrounding objects. Some grab at attention by quipping, I don't care. Others sit in corners, closely watching their fingers. We fill the world with selfie avatars, and more children refuse to recognize their names. And then I'm going to read one more batch of new poems, and that will be it. Password. As if the problem were that I couldn't stuff the bulky text into the child's backpack and was late for a class I never registered for so long ago. Business tiptoes in a world of masks. People relate to a transparent sham, as if genre weren't camo. Strange to wake rested after these dreams of disaster and scandal not registered as such. When I've stared long enough at the rough-skinned, snub-nosed, or tough-nippled lemons, I will give attention to World Password Day. Lonely girl. It wasn't her fault. She couldn't have loved any of them because they never came out of themselves, emerged as what? Disembodied? Transparent? She couldn't explain herself either. Self is an area where will intersects with drift. It has ruffled, frothy edges, like a square dance dress. Look. Lying in the dark, nose buried in her arms crook, she felt like a girl, or pictured herself as one, or loved herself as much as she had when she was a girl, and first coiled up. That was her secret. Panicle. A panicle is a kind of flower shape. So that'll come back around at the end. Panicle. The hope is that the fungus, mycelium, exchanges messages through a vast underground network. The hope is that we're not alone. A small black spider cautiously explores the wet plastic trash bag. A woman somewhere across the street says, "I don't know," and laughs. The hope is in the facts. Buzzing, a bee slams time and again against a blue-black wall. The hope is that the universe is formed of an infinite number of Y-shaped prongs, rocking stiffly in the wind, spitting out lilac panicles. Finalist. This one is new. This is probably the first time I've read this poem. Get to a group. Finalist. Nothing to see here. Pine cones litter the gutters. Whose turn is it to blow on the mirror, Mama? Each pushes forward in her wild eagerness to take part in a ritual. Is this that thing about fireflies? Maybe. We use similes to show things are connected, and they are, just not in the ways we say. A hole in fresh dirt surrounded by orange cones into which a crow peers, hops sideways, then peers again. These wildlife finalists will take your breath away. And then this one, well, you'll see. I guess I'll dedicate it to California. Too much information. Deers, the backward-facing S, a decoration in the iron rail, was here when I came, with its extra curlicues at each end and a miniature version of itself, like a fetus affixed to its middle. I'm telling you more, perhaps, than you need to know. The sun on the rail's inner curves is a private matter, something like love, despite the roar of the nearby freeway. I mix love up with safety. It's hard to come by good ideas while California goes up in flames. It's hard to have a new idea while temps in LA rival those in Iran. I can't say anything more original than gender reveal party sparks massive wildfire in tinder dry forest. You never know what will matter next. Pack everything. And in case you were wondering, 4 more. They're not very long. Motorcycle. Playfellow. It was like dreaming. I thought I was carrying animals to a castle in a backhoe, but really I was shoving plastic down a chute. No, a hall. Speech is role-playing before it is thought. We talk as if to others, then to others, and then, finally, to ourselves. But really I was speaking to a room full of strangers in words I could almost make out. Delivery. This one is very new too and it's never been read before. And the next one. Delivery. I can walk in the wake of what I heard you say, between the peaks of waves where the water is glassy and will bear weight for a time, all the way to far Hakamba, where you once refused delivery. Hakamba alight, Hakamba in flames. Pyramid. I dreamed of family drama, a kind of pyramid scheme. 3 generations of messiahs, an old man, his son, and a stolen baby who had to be regularly replaced in secret. The son was a wastrel, some comic relief. Then the flowers at the window got bigger, nearer, more engrossing. That was all I ever wanted, I tried to explain. And this will be the last one. Split. There are pockets of apocalypse, invaginations. Don't wince. I know you've always appreciated correspondence, the dormant stage of contagion. Some say truth is a form of parasitism. It is what it is. Distal and proximal have split down the mid-rib of the leaf. Okay, thank you.
Wow, everyone. We can give her applause from our emojis. It's not the same as hearing it in person, perhaps, but yes, that was an amazing reading. And what an honor to hear not only from your new book just published, Conjure, but from the new manuscript. Really, you're getting a lot of text messages here.
Yeah?
Alda Nielsen, I am muted with admiration. Gregory Crosby, best mummy's curse poem ever. Oh, and Chuck, your husband got several hellos once you told him to stop making noise.
Yeah, poor man. Now he's going outside.
So you might want to check your messages here. Chat messages. Pamela Laskin, love. Burkhart, applause. Pack everything. The phrase du jour, isn't it?
Yeah.
We have many beloved people right now on the glass fire, fleeing their homes in Northern California, and it is beyond tragic. Some of the most beautiful land I've ever seen. Not that I've been around the world, but it's unbelievable.
Is that the one that's in Napa Sonoma?
Yes, it's Napa Sonoma. The winery on Silverado Road. They're family owned. They've been there a long time. Most gorgeous scenery I've ever treated myself to on my drives.
Yeah, it's tragic.
Just tragic. Yes, well, Rae, you are a native Californian, I believe, correct?
Yeah.
Yep.
I was born in Vallejo and then raised most of my life in San Diego. Spent some time in the Bay Area. The last 3.5 years really is the only time I haven't lived in California.
Right. You moved to Seattle to be with your grandchildren.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I open it to questions to the poet or comments about the work. Everybody is most welcome to pitch in, and hope that you can, we can get a dialogue going. So how about it?
It's hard. I used to teach too, so I know it's hard sometimes.
Yeah, well, you kind of stun us. I mean, unfortunately, I don't have those the newest book because it's on order, and it should be coming tomorrow, I believe. But so I'm really looking forward to it, and you gave me a nice introduction to it. What an honor. So, who has a question or wants to make a comment?
I'll ask a question.
Yes, Elizabeth.
Hi.
Hi.
First off, thank you so much. This was lovely. I don't go to a lot of live or virtual live readings, so it was lovely. But I get a lot out of hearing the author's words and the author's in the writer's voice in that way. But I'm curious to know, for you as a poet and a writer, what do you enjoy about live readings? What do you enjoy about reading your words to people?
Well, the same thing. I like to voice the poems, and in the old days when we were actually live and we were really in the same room with each other, I guess like any performer. I mean, a poet's a weird kind of performer, but like any performer, I could feel the room, and sometimes the room would give me energy back. A lot of times. So it's a little weird doing it on Zoom, but we're all getting used to this because we have to. And at least we can have, audiences that are really from all over, so that's pretty great.
Yes.
Yeah, thank you. Yes.
Yeah, I really loved your last poem, Split.
Oh.
It was very brief and very creative. So I wanted to know what's your usual process of writing?
Split came about by an unusual process. It's actually a kind of ekphrastic poem, if you know. I don't know if you know what that is, but that's a poem that's based on looking at visual art, or so I think that's probably the extent of the definition of it. And I'm part of some kind of telephone game that's being played now, where artists in different genres are asked to respond to each other's work without knowing who did the work. And I was sent reproductions of 2 paintings, and I was asked to kind of somehow synthesize them in a poem. Synthesize my impressions of these 2 paintings in a poem. And so that's how it started. I think even my friends who are here don't know that, and they've seen the poem. But so eventually it's going to be part of this big kind of installation somewhere with all of these artworks. And, some will be music and some will be paintings. But that has nothing to do with my usual writing method, which is what you asked about. I mean, generally speaking, I just kind of look around, look at what's in front of me, and I incorporate that. I incorporate obviously not everything I see, but the things that provoke some emotion in me, I incorporate into my work, and also things I read that stimulate me. I'll bounce off of that. I see myself as just kind of bouncing off of things and getting takes, and then sort of weaving these different takes together, hopefully, into a text.
Thank you, Hamisha. That was a wonderful question. I was very entranced by also the sound in Split. Tell me if I have the words right, Ray. There are pockets of apocalypse.
Yeah.
I mean, what I love about your work is just are these lines that are just unbelievable and no one else would have ever thought of them.
Well, I was, like I said, like I told your student, I was looking at this painting that wasn't exactly of apocalypse, although I just have that on my mind all the time, but it was a painting of a very sort of rundown apartment building, but it was more surreal than that. There were these kind of black places in it that looked like mold spreading out and then trees growing from some of them. And so from that I got pockets and invaginations, which comes next. And it kind of looked like a slow moving apocalypse. But there's something about just the pock. Pock.
The sound, yeah. So
yeah,
the images and the sound. Who else has a question?
I noticed that, like, in your writing, and I really liked it, that you used, like, short but very concise and significant phrases, like, where would you spend eternity, and words cannot bring the past to the present, and, like, I was wondering how you condense your ideas into such, like, coherent phrases that make us as readers, like, really think about what you wrote.
That's so nice. Thank you so much for saying
Of course.
For calling me coherent, because in my youth, or, I don't mean just when I was 25, but I mean in my earlier days, the first half of my career, and believe me, my work was not that much different. The people here, there are some people who've known me all this time, and they can tell me if I'm wrong, but my work was not all that much different. And there was some pushback out there in the world telling me that this was unintelligible, that it skipped around too much, it wasn't coherent, it just didn't look like a poem should look. So I appreciate what you're saying. As for how I condense, well, by habit, I guess now. I started out I think a lot of poets start out reading poetry, really. If you want to be a poet, you should read poetry. And so that's the common advice, but it's true. And I started out reading poets like first William Carlos Williams and later Robert Creeley, and poets like Lorene Niedecker, who isn't as well known, but she's wonderful. You should read her too. H.D. among the modernists. So all of those poets wrote very condensed poems, and that appealed to me. I think it appealed to me. It's not just that I went, oh, there's something, I'll imitate it. It struck a chord with me, and so I kind of went down that road, and maybe it's just part of my nature. I mean, I think, even in speech, I'm a bit laconic. But maybe it's part of what I learned from these poets I read. Anyway, by now it's just practice. What do they say about, 100,000 hours of practice, 10,000 hours? I'm bad with numbers. I cannot remember it, but there's that saying that if you practice a certain number of hours, you'll just do something.
Yeah, I think it's the 10,000 hour theory or something.
Okay, I turned that into 100,000 because that's how I am with numbers. I cannot.
Yeah, same here.
Thank you, Andrew. That was a great question.
It looks like Ayana Grogan might have her hand up.
Okay, Ayana, let's hear from you.
Yeah, thanks for being here, Ms. Armantrout. I really enjoyed your reading. My question was, how do you write such great one-liners? I think the way you read is very unassuming, because you'd say a line like, I mix love up with safety, or truth is a form of parasitism, and I have to stop for a second and it kind of hits me. So how do you write something so powerful in such a short line? And
all I can say to that is thank you so much for making me happy. I don't know. Thank you for saying that, though. I hope you all feel that way.
Is it just by accident, maybe?
It's just one accident after another. It's just like a pile up on the freeway. No, I'm just kidding. I think it's a choice, a combination of choice and practice. That I choose to condense. I do think that even in longer, I mean, I tend to write fairly short poems with fairly short lines, but even in longer poems with longer lines, there can be extra words that just weaken it, that just aren't pithy and forceful. So you want to get rid of those. You want to weed those out, and that's how you start to condense.
I think that makes me curious about what your editing practice is like. How many drafts do you go through?
It varies. Usually a lot, usually quite a few. But sometimes not. Once in a while, I get it right off. And I don't know how that happens. The poem I read, I don't know if I'm not saying it's right, but the poem, I'm just saying this is odd. It's an oddity. The poem I read called Delivery, I literally got from a dream. And I don't mean I dreamed the scenario. I don't mean this is the plot of the dream. I mean, I woke up with those words in my head. I think it's 16 lines. And so all but the last 2 lines were in my head, and I got up and I ran downstairs and wrote them down just like that. So that can happen, but it's like that kind of gift from the poetry gods is rare. Usually I go through a gazillion drafts.
That's so interesting about the dream, because I have 2 classes, some of whom are here right now, who are working on a poem based on a 2-week dream journal. Read Bernadette Mayer's first chapter in Midwinter Day, which she, of course, rehearsed for 2 weeks by keeping the dream journal ahead of that day on, December the 22nd, 1978, where she sat down and started recording her early morning dreams, and then, of course...
Yeah, I love that. I used to teach that, too.
Yeah, so we read that, and they're working right now this week on taking the dream now, just to take that a little further. So you kind of had a visionary moment where you had these words and you just wrote them down, and that's kind of a gift. But you also say that you revise a lot. For some of them, they may be taking dream images and little bits and pieces of things, words, and a visual image, a piece of a narrative, and threading it together. I noticed that you had another piece that was Chuck's dream, your husband.
Yeah, I stole his dream.
Stole a dream. And students, bear this in mind. If you don't have any dreams, there's a couple of you are worried about not dreaming enough for that dream journal. Well, maybe you can steal one. You see, we're all thieves in the art business here. But so how many did you have to revise? Quite a bit for that piece. That was wonderful, by the way.
Oh, thank you. That was, I think, kind of medium in the revision department. I have to look at it to try to remember how often I revised it. The dream part, still haven't found it yet. It's in here somewhere. I think the description of the dream came out pretty much as is, almost. And
you really did steal it.
I really stole it, yeah. I changed it some because there was, of course, more to it. I mean, there were more details that, for whatever reason, I don't remember them now. It'd be great if I could remember what I cut out, but I don't. There were some that I just couldn't sort of fit in. It would seem like I was going on, and it wouldn't contribute anything further to talk about compression. But so I did cut some of it out, but that's about all.
I think we have 2 hands. One hand might have gone down, but Bethany, I think, had a hand up first, and then also Marjan, if either of you would like to unmute.
Bethany, Marjan, go ahead.
Well, I really enjoyed your reading, and I really resonated with the line. I don't recall what the title of the poem was, but I really resonated with the line, add yourself to yourself, now you have someone.
Uh-huh.
I just would really love to hear about how, this theme of identity and, experiences, and how your experiences as a grandmother and your identity as a woman has influenced your writing. So thank you.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Well, I came to the grandmother business rather late. I see some people, usually, I have to admit, on television, who are grandmothers at the age of 42, but that didn't happen to me. God, I won't even get to that part, but I wasn't a grandmother until pretty late in life. So I don't know that it affected my identity. I think it maybe opened up something in me. I don't know if, we want to talk about that, but obviously, it's easy to kind of go, yeah, this is the world and the world is fucked. Forget it. I'm sorry. This is a class. Never mind. Sorry, Laura. Is that okay? But to be cynical, it's easy to be cynical. And then when you have grandkids and you realize this is the world they're going to grow up in, you kind of go, no, that shouldn't happen, and it's more, it's easy to feel that way anyway. You're a young person, so you should feel that way. But sometimes you can get kind of hardened and cynical as you just see things go the wrong way time and again. You know what I mean? So I guess maybe I was in that state, and then being a grandmother kind of made me a little more maybe caring. That poem's called Care, actually.
Interesting.
I think Marjan is next, and then I had some hands that I'm not seeing, but I know are going up. Possibly Steve. You do have a hand raise feature in the participants menu. That's a good way to make sure you get included, or you can just message me your name to make sure that you get called on, since there's
Steve
several
and
people.
Hamisha again.
Marjan, Walid, and Steve are up next. They're in the queue.
Marjan?
Hi, ma'am. It's an honor to be able to hear all of your poems, and it was wonderful hearing your poems. I had a question regarding your personal, since you used your husband Chuck's dream, do you have a change towards, an attitude change towards how you use your personal experience in your poems, or is it still the same with drawn throughout your work till now?
I've always used some personal experiences in my work. That was weird, because taking his dream was strange, because I just did it before I asked permission, and then I asked permission. So, but I'd already done it, so he kind of couldn't say no. I think he halfway wanted to. So, using other people can be tricky. Even writing about my granddaughters, because, now I'm still doing it, and now that they're 3.5 and they say cute things, and sometimes I put what they say into poems, and I see no harm in that. But what if they grow up and read it and are embarrassed? I don't know. What if their parents don't like it and feel it's intrusive? All of these things are possible. I've always used some of my personal history and experience, but I've never written really narrative poems that just tell a story from the beginning to the end, because I just like to have more flexibility to move around and to mix and match, and to take a personal anecdote and play it off maybe against something a philosopher said, or something I happened to see another person do, So my poems are more pastiche than narrative. But the personal has always come in. Sometimes maybe in a kind of disguised way, sometimes not.
Thank you.
Question. Thank you, Marjan.
Walid?
Hi. I'll be honest, I haven't written, poems as much, so it will be even it would be even hard for me to call myself an amateur. But reading and listening to your poems really motivates me to write, and hopefully I write something that I can be proud of someday. So what would be your tip to someone who is beginning beginning their journey in poetry?
Well, first, like I said, read. Find out who you enjoy. Get an anthology. That's what we used to do in the old days, anyway. Lara and your other teachers can point you the right way. Or see find good internet sites. And again, your teachers can point you the right way. And find poets you like, and then buy their books and study them, And that's one thing. Another thing is just pay attention to the world, and don't think that everything that you write has to sound like, something sublime or something that John Keats might write. He was a romantic poet from the 19th century. Don't feel that way. Feel like whatever you're thinking right now, whatever you're feeling or seeing, especially seeing, because really pay attention to. When I taught, my complaint with my students is they would write about how depressed they were, and it would be all, oh, I'm so depressed, I want to cut my wrists, I'm so depressed. But it would never be what they were depressed about. And I would want to say, like, what's the thing? What's happening? And then one girl said that, her parents were losing their house because of, the shenanigans of the stock market. So that's a thing, put the thing in, not just your feelings. That would be part of my advice, I guess.
Thank you.
Wonderful advice.
I love that. Put the thing in. That's great. Steve, you are up next.
Okay. Rae, you have a really intriguing image framed and hung on the wall behind you for this reading. I'm wondering if you could shed some light on how you have happened to find an interaction between your poetry and that image, or what it has to do with your writing.
Well, I noticed, I don't know if she's still with us, but I noticed that the painter of this painting was in the audience. Her name is Francie Shaw, and she gifted us this, for which I'm very grateful. And what does it mean to me? Well, it's both funny and sinister. Right? It's a little Red Riding Hood, I assume. You can't see colors, but it looks like Little Red Riding Hood to me. Being followed by really sinister-looking giant squid that have big eyes that are staring at her. So it's really an improbable scenario, a weird twist on a fairy tale, and maybe a little paranoid. If Francie wants to contradict me, that's fine. But that's probably what I saw and liked, how it might relate to me and my work.
Yeah, thank you.
Yes, Francie's still here with Bob Perlman. Would you like to comment?
They might have skipped out.
They ducked out. Okay. Can't put them on the spot. All right. Did you have a question? Dodrick, maybe you have a cue.
Fatima is up next in the queue.
Fatima, okay.
I'm Miss Armantrout. I really enjoyed what you made. Your poems are they're able to be as people have said, they've been profound with even more what we'd consider as somewhat relatively simple terminology. And I think that as writers, especially for a class, it's kind of hard finding inspiration because a lot of times we're forced to do something. So I was wondering, how do you get your inspiration? Is it only I know you talked about personal experiences, but even about things that you may not have experience with, or things that a topic that you think of, how are you able to articulate that in something that can be enjoyed?
Well, that's really two questions, the way how I sort of get inspiration and then how I articulate it. But starting with getting inspiration, I kind of know when something I think or feel or perceive could possibly be a poem, it comes, often it's something that puzzles me, or intrigues me, or disturbs me. And so it comes with that feeling attached, the feeling that, what is that? Why do I have a feeling like that? And I want to like follow that thing further so I can figure out how and why I'm reacting to it. And so I start writing, almost as a way of figuring out why I'm having the reaction. And the thing could be, like the poem in the book about the eucalyptus tree. That I'll tell you exactly how that came about. I was still working. I got to work early. I was UCSD. I was parked in the parking garage on the top level, and I was looking right into a eucalyptus tree, which in San Diego is just a normal, ordinary thing to be doing. But somehow, being that close to it, because I was up 5 stories, so being that close to it and the sun on it, and, it just looked really beautiful and somehow moving to me, even though I see them all the time. I mean, it sort of struck an emotional chord, which is unusual, because, they don't usually affect me that way. So I thought, what is it I'm seeing? What am I really feeling? What's getting to me about this? And then I started to write towards that.
That's another beautiful line. Eucalyptus elliptical leaves.
Yeah.
So there's an image.
Hanging light and dry. Yeah.
Sound image.
Mm-hmm.
Really nice.
Thank you.
Okay, up next it looks like Melanie had her hand up, but then it went down. So Melanie, if you want to speak, you're welcome to, and if not, Rob, you are up.
Hi, Melanie.
Hi, Professor. Thank you so much for the beautiful poems, and I have a question. Who or what inspired you to write poems? Like, what was that inspired you to become a writer?
Okay, good question. Well, my mother read poetry to me when I was quite young. She had a book of poems for children, but some of them weren't really for children. In fact, there were even a couple of Emily Dickinson poems in there. So, she's not usually thought of as a children's poet. But some of and it was an illustrated book too, and it had really kind of nice, old-fashioned, whimsical illustrations. And I was, 5 or 6 at the time, and those poems and illustrations just really got into me, and I guess became fascinated. And then when I was in 1st grade, my teacher liked poetry and wanted us all to make up poems. And so I got into making up poems then, and she made little mimeograph books of them. And so having good teachers is important. And then when I was in 7th grade, somehow my English teacher gave me, and this is a wonderful gift, an anthology of called Modern American Poetry that went from, this was a long time ago, so it basically was the modernists. It went from Emily Dickinson, who's not usually considered a modernist, so she gets in all these categories, through the modernists, and probably up to Auden. And so here I had this book, and I was 12 or 13 or something, but some of the poems really spoke to me. And partly William Carlos Williams, and it might have been the way his poems are so short that drew me to them first. I went, I could read this, But then he writes wonderfully about trees. Thinking about my eucalyptus poem, he writes just, he's got a poem called Young Sycamore that's amazing. I don't know where I first read that, but I read some of his tree poems, I know, in that anthology. And I guess T.S. Eliot, The Hollow Men, I read that. Probably all teenagers respond to that because it's about how everyone is fake and everyone is hollow and no one's telling you the truth, which, is a big issue for most teenagers. So anyway, that really not only kept up my interest in poetry, but it exposed me to poetry that didn't have rhyme and meter, because the poems that my mother had read me were all in rhyme and meter, and I thought that's how it had to be. And then when I read the modernists, I realized that's not how it had to be. and that, it could be more modern. So that helped me to start writing on my own. And I've been writing really since I was a kid.
I think Rob is up.
Bob?
All right. So I have a writing methodology type question as well. So saying your work is self-aware is definitely a sort of understatement, but it's maybe something I'm sort of imagining. But I sort of feel in your last few volumes, you seem to have more poems that refer back self-consciously to ideas and concepts that you've addressed in earlier poems, and sometimes even like specific references to earlier poems. So I was sort of curious about whether, having an awareness that you have a body of work out there that you've already created, does that affect how you go about writing new poems? Is it something you're sort of conscious of? Is it something you try to avoid thinking about? I'm just interested.
Well, I think the main way it affects me is perhaps negatively, in that I think, oh my God, I've had this idea before. I've been here before. Where did I say this before? And can I say this again? So, so is this a different enough way to say this? Because, people do have obsessions, needless to say. I have obsessions. So I keep kind of sometimes hitting on the same things. Like I'm interested in consciousness and self-consciousness, not self-consciousness as in social embarrassment, but consciousness of self. So I'm interested and now having grandkids, you see them becoming conscious, becoming self, becoming linguistic beings. So that just plays right into that. For a long time, I've been interested in learning about physics, and so that's been ongoing since Ron Silliman and I wrote Engines together, which I was reading physics for the first time then, I think. And then also, market capitalism and some of its ploys and depredations has been a theme of mine forever. This is maybe getting away from your question a little bit, but and now it's just gotten unimaginably worse. I think one thing that has been happening in my books lately that didn't happen in my earlier books, maybe starting with Versed, although with Versed it wasn't deliberate, but is that they've been sometimes having not exactly themes. I never have a theme, but kind of a constellation of concerns that you could almost call a theme. Like with Verse, that's when I was sick and had cancer, so that came into not all, but quite a few of the poems. And then I wrote Money Shot, and that was during the 2007-2008 financial, people call it crisis, but I think it was worse than that. But So I for that I was deliberately listening to and reading financial news so I could pick up the vocabulary and put it in my poems. So I've been doing that maybe more, maybe steering the poems a little bit. I don't steer too much as some of my friends who really have like a plot and a plan, and I'm more improvisational than that. But lately I have been thinking, well, like my ongoing, no, actually not ongoing, some of this work is really new, and some of it that I read today is from a manuscript that's forthcoming called Threat Landscape. So you can tell from the title what some of the theme there might be, right? So the grandkids come in again, but so do all of these different threats that face us, from climate change, fire, disease, political collapse, so all of those things come in. And they would probably anyway, because that's what's around me, but I'm steering in that direction a little bit, like taking one poem out and putting another poem in because it relates to the theme, and so engineering it a little more than maybe I used to.
Thank you, Ray and Rob. Janelle, you are up next in the queue.
Awesome. Thank you so much. This was beautiful. It was really inspiring. Today was a rough day, so I really enjoyed the power of poetry and words. And I was really struck by the imagery that connects sort of nature with the plastic machine world that we live in.
Yeah.
And also the way that I feel like your writing attacks that, like breaks it up and chops it down. So one of my favorite lines was the line about what comes after the day, the word that we use for day, or I forget something like, but it was about like what comes next. So can you talk about how you use not only imagery, but the line itself to create openings as resistance?
Well, in terms of using the line to create openings, one thing I like to do, I have always been drawn to, is double meanings, like, so that you think you know what something means, and then you do a kind of double take and go, oh, no, it can also mean this. The poem called that does what I don't think it's the poem you were talking about, but it is a poem that addresses plastic. And it's the one that starts, dressed all in plastic, which means oil. We're bright-eyed, scrambling for the colored cubes spilled on the rug's polymer. But the we there is really my granddaughter's playing with plastic toys, because there's all toys these days are plastic, or almost all of them. I mean, yes, you can be a purist and buy all wood toys, but I'm not the parents, so the parents have bought them plastic toys. So here we are dealing with plastic toys all day long. So, when I used the word spilled, I was thinking, okay, that, they spilled these toys out, but I'm also thinking the oil spills there too. So, trying to get different resonances going. And at the end, it goes, creatures that never wake can sprout a whole new limb, a tail. This may be wrong. Well, I mean, this may be wrong in two ways. I may be wrong that these creatures never wake. I may be wrong that they can sprout a whole new limb, although that's actually true. Some animals can. But, okay, I may be wrong that they never wake. It may be factually untrue. But it may also be factually true, but, it could be because of pollution they're who knows what they're sprouting now. They could have 8 limbs when they should have 4. So I'm trying to, I guess, allow a kind of room around the statement for people to ruminate.
Simone and Ayana, you are our last 2 questions for the evening.
Hello. I do want to say I apologize for signing on late. Time kind of gets away from me in the evening here. But I was curious, in terms of talking about process and your creative process and revision, my dad and my stepmom are both writers and studied creative writing in school. And my dad, he does branding work, so his exercises kind of focus on sharing short stories, and my stepmom does more like, she does, I don't know how you call it, but she's written cookbooks and travel guides, so her practice is poetry. And I was just wondering, do you engage in, when writing a poem, like you said, you revise it enough times, but do you engage in any kind of writing, what are your writing exercises that kind of give you, I guess, a reprieve, or just to kind of help build your skills? What does that process look like for you?
Well, I guess when I don't have ideas, or when I feel kind of like it's not happening, I read. And sometimes I read poets I like to kind of, get inspired by them. And then sometimes I read books that will give me interesting ideas, whether it's often in science or philosophy or social issues, politics. So it's often reading that gets me going, but sometimes taking a walk and looking around too can help.
That's so interesting. Our first assignment with creative writing students was well, first of all, to look around the room and look at the corners and look at how you were looking, and then take a walk. So they're well aware of that. So we have time for one more question. I think, Yana, you have that question, and then we'll be wrapping up. This has been such a delight. Yana?
Yeah. My question was about writing during quarantine. So have you been writing during the lockdown?
Yeah.
And how do you do it? Because I find that everything I write is about quarantine, is about COVID. So how do you find inspiration when you're stuck in the house and can't go anywhere?
Well, some of what I write has referenced the disease. Not all of it, not all the time, but the disease has definitely come in. Or being lonely, like the poem called "Lonely Girl" doesn't mention the disease, but it was written out of that sense of being alone a lot. Like I am married, so that helps. But my husband Chuck was working for the census, which is a good thing to do to help people be counted for representation. But that means that he was gone a lot for a month, like really a lot. And and he took the car, so I was just here in this house. So sometimes I write about being alone and being lonely too. But I mean, there's just so much going on. You read the newspaper or something, and you're just blown away. So between COVID and the fires and Trump, and I mean, didn't he kind of last night call for like white supremacist groups to what did he say? Stand down, but stand by. Like, okay, when the time comes, you hit the streets. And I mean, that was terrifying. I'm just going on and on about that. But,
he was stand down, stand by, like he's the general.
Yeah, like I know. That is military talk, exactly. And it's very much like for those, some of you are young, most of you are very young, but it's exactly like, I know this is not your question, but I'm just obsessed. It's exactly like Hitler before he took over. He was elected, that, right? He was elected first, and then he became a dictator. Well, before he took absolute power, he had this group called the Brown Shirts, and they were just roaming the streets being thugs and, harming Jews or anyone who disagreed. And that's partly how he took over. So when I heard Trump say that, I just went, oh, brown shirts. It's not that I was alive then, but we used to think more about it in the old days.
Rae, this has been an astounding experience. You came to City College. I don't know if you remember, but
of course I do. Yeah,
you do. You got off a plane and you whizzed into the.
I was almost late because
This was probably 2007, or I have it written down quite a while ago, and your brilliance just gets bigger and better as we go on. I mean, it's just unbelievable. You've inspired me. I think you've inspired everyone today. Given us a lot to think about and to read. So
I think you've been inspiring your students because they seem
listen to them. Aren't they brilliant?
Really attuned to all this stuff.
They're brilliant. I'm telling you, they're New Yorkers. They're with it. They're brilliant. I'm so proud of them. I have a colleague here, Pam Laskin, who teaches creative writing, and she knows them very well. She knows this brilliance too.
Yeah, it was impressive.
We're very lucky. Okay, I wish we could keep going, everybody, but I know Rae is probably exhausted. we have made her work, and everybody has things to do and dinner to get if you haven't already on the East Coast time. But I look forward to seeing my students on Monday and have a little assignment, everybody, to do. Read your syllabus, and those of you who came who are not at City College, we are very thrilled that you were here. We are grateful for your presence. So with that note, we'll say goodbye. night.
Bye.
And thanks to Dudrick for helping me host.
Thank you. Bye bye.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Everybody.